Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to Vastola on the Law. It is January 23rd, 2021, and I finally got the timing right on that introduction, so Facebook Livers don't have to sit here and just look at me going dum-de-dum. But this is 30 minutes of free legal advice. I'm Jeff Vastola. I'm an attorney, and I'm here to answer your questions. I have a couple of topics on tap here on my outline, but my preference is to answer the questions that you may have, the issues that are affecting you in your everyday life. So please call into the show. That's why we're here. The number, you just heard it, it's 877-850-8585. That will get you live on the air with me. Sharina, my board operator, will take your name. If you want to share that with us, you can always make up a fake name if you want. And she'll put you through to me live on the air. We just ask that you mind your P's and Q's, so to speak, because you will be live on the air. And don't give us the names of people that you want to sue or the neighbor that you're angry with for some reason, because I don't want to get any of their hate mail. But certainly I am here to help you. If you ask me a question that I happen to know the answer to right here, right now, then I will share that with you. And more importantly, if I don't know the answer to your question, then I will research the issue and get back to you the following week with what I consider to be an educated response to the question. And then, if it's not enough, you can always follow up with me to say, that's great, Jeff, but, can you answer this or can you look into that? And I'm happy to do those things. So again, the number to call into the show, 877-850-8585. Now, don't confuse that number with another number that I always give out, and that other number is my cell phone. It's a toll-free number that forwards to my cell phone 24/7. And that number is 833-VASTOLA. My last name is V as in Victor, A-S-T-O-L-A. That number is 833-VASTOLA. And the numbers, numerically, 833-827-8652. I know sometimes it's difficult to know what number corresponds with a certain letter. So the number to reach me 24/7, if you think that you have a case that you want to talk to me about, is 833-827-8652. My self-promotion is done because my law firm pays for this time every Saturday. 30 minutes on the air is not cheap. So I'm here to help you, no doubt about it, but I am also here for people that might want to hire me because they have a case. And good morning, Patty. Nice to see you this morning. Hope you have a wonderful day. It's foggy out there. Pretty interesting look to the day so far this morning. But it's going to be beautiful. Beautiful weather here in Florida. If you're watching from outside the state, I hope your weather is fantastic. And call into the show, 877-850-8585. That's why I'm here. I'm here to take your phone calls. Last week, I had an interesting call. It wasn't necessarily a question, but it was a caller named Robert from Fort Lauderdale who was calling in to tell me that his son apparently was having difficulty with re-employment in the state of Florida because he's now a convicted felon. And so I surmised from our conversation that the question was, what can my son do to seek re-employment in the state of Florida? So there are a couple of statutes that are on point. And after I give you these two statutes to review, because that would be, I suppose, my legal advice in response to the issue, I want to talk about a report that I found. Governor Jeb Bush put together a task force in 2007 to address this issue specifically about recidivism. I'm not saying that right. I'll have to practice that word a couple of times before I get it right. But the ability to re-employ convicted felons back into the workforce. So, employment screening. Now, this is Florida Statute, Chapter 435, talks about employment screening. There are certain jobs in the state of Florida that require employment screening, especially public jobs, but jobs in the public domain, working for the government. The employment screening statute is very thorough, and it talks about specifically what types of disqualifications for what types of jobs exist according to the statute. And so some that would be the more obvious ones were any job where you might be working with children. If you are a convicted felon as a sexual predator, you're disqualified for life. You're not going to qualify for a job in that sector anymore. But that's one of the more extreme examples. There is a lengthy list of jobs that are either disqualified or not disqualified if you seek application for them. Sometimes you have to show history of rehabilitation and good moral character and stuff like that. But all of that is set forth in this statute, chapter 435. So Robert, interesting window that just popped up. I think Don is trying to video chat on Facebook with me this morning. Don, I can't get to that, but I'll certainly listen to it and respond to you later this morning. Don, of course, one of our longtime and frequent listeners of the show. The other statute that I wanted to reference, just in case somebody wants to look into this on their own, this is another reemployment statute, and this one is entitled Public Officers, Employees, and Records. It's chapter 112, and specifically 112.011 talks about disqualification from licensing and public employment based on criminal conviction. So it's another statute that focuses again on those similar issues. The other statute, 435, being a little bit more specific about the employment screening issues. This one is more definitive for the disqualification because of a criminal conviction. And oftentimes understand that the way these statutes are written, it doesn't necessarily have to be a conviction. For example, I think it was in 435 that I was reading that it can be a plea. So even if there's a withhold of adjudication, all of those different ways that cases can sometimes be resolved will still bring these statutes into play. Not necessarily disqualify you based on what your conviction was and what you're looking to do in the way of employment. You have to match everything up. But Robert, those are two good places to start to help your son. Hey, Andy, good morning. Andy Reich is one of my friends, a lawyer up in the Treasure Coast. Excellent work comp lawyer. It's a little plug for you, Andy. If you have any questions about reemployment, then I would strongly encourage you to look at these statutes, but also to find this article, and I found it on Google. It's the Governor's Ex-Offender Task Force report from January of 2007. This is back when Jeb Bush was our governor. He put together this task force because I guess there was an issue that needed to be addressed of just how many ex-offenders are there out there that are seeking employment, because I guess it was an issue. And so statistically, I just want to point out some of the statistics from the report, and then I'm going to move on with the show because I've got a couple of other things I want to talk about today. But at least as of 2007, now mind you, this date is a little bit old, but it's the one that I found. 1,673,797 individuals that are in a database in Florida alone that have criminal convictions identified as either a felony or misdemeanor. And they're broken down as follows: 804,554 people with felony convictions, and that includes people with felony and misdemeanor, but they do have at least one felony. 869,243 people with misdemeanor convictions and no felony convictions. Mind you, misdemeanor convictions can come into play based on those two statutes and depending on the crime. And then there are random 261,228 individuals in the database for unknown charge level. I don't really know what that would mean because as far as I know, there were only felonies and misdemeanors. Maybe it's crimes as a juvenile, which are sometimes blocked for some reason. And then there's the much larger number is 3,169,593 people have a disposition other than a conviction, which is what I mentioned before, the adjudication withheld, a plea, which probably includes adjudication withheld. You can tell I've never done criminal law in my life. And then there's another category of acquitted. So there are people in the database that were arrested, prosecuted, but ultimately acquitted, but they're still in the database, which in my mind is, I guess if the database is meant to track everybody that's ever been arrested and then ultimately acquitted, that would make sense. But if you've been acquitted of a crime, none of this discussion that I'm having this morning should come into play. It should not affect you, assuming that's your only crime. Acquitted would mean that a jury found based on all the evidence that you did not commit the crime. So it goes on to say in this report that the task force has estimated that of the 7.6 million jobs in the Florida economy. So if you're ever curious to know, hey, I wonder just how many jobs there are out there. Well, apparently there's 7.6 million jobs in the Florida economy. At least 39.2% of the jobs in Florida appear to be subject to the state-created criminal background checks or the restrictions based on criminal history. So almost 40% of the jobs, and I think this is why Robert ultimately contacted me last week, is because his son is finding it incredibly difficult to find re-employment after a conviction, and that's because almost 40% of the jobs require a criminal background check. It's not just public employment, working for the government. It's also a lot of the private sector that require a criminal background check. Now, I, as a personal injury lawyer, I don't require a criminal background check. Somebody could work for me that's been convicted before. I ask in my application, have you ever been arrested? And I expect people to be honest, but I don't perform a criminal background check on individuals. So there are jobs in the private sector where you wouldn't even be subject to that. So again, Robert, if you're listening on behalf of your son, then perhaps he should be looking for employment in the private sector that would not be subject to these criminal background checks. And there are a lot of positions. And what I'd recommend you do, Robert, is just reach out to me and say, where can I find this report, Governor Jeb Bush's task force report on the reemployment? Because I'll just send you to this report. It's 11 pages long, and it's packed full of information, specifically the different sectors where criminal background checks are required. So then you can kind of eliminate those if you're finding difficulty getting employment in there, and then go to the other areas of employment where perhaps you won't have to have a background check done. So if anybody has any questions about this topic, then feel free to call into the show. The number is 877-850-8585. The good news is that you don't have to have questions about this topic. You can have any question at all. And that's why I am here every Saturday morning for 30 minutes. I'm here to give you free legal advice. I'm here to talk, and I'm going to fill up 30 minutes of radio and Facebook Live time with discussions of my own. But I do want to hear from you. I want you to interrupt me. I know a lot of people are polite, and they think, well, you've just been, going on about your own issues, and you prepared a topic, and so I've heard this. I don't want to interrupt because you have a topic of your own. Well, the only reason I have a topic of my own is because I'm waiting for somebody to call into the show. So 877-850-8585. That's the number to call between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays. Put you live on the air, and you can ask me anything you want. It doesn't have to be limited to Robert's question from last week. It doesn't have to be limited to personal injury, wrongful death, medical malpractice. Those are areas of law that I practice Monday through Friday, and sometimes on the weekend, depending on how busy we are. But most oftentimes, your question will result in me having to do some research, and then it becomes an interesting topic. And so I really do enjoy the phone calls. I enjoy the interaction, and I enjoy, believe it or not, doing the research. I remember when I was a kid told, learning is fun. I think there were probably some, PSAs out there when I was a kid with probably some little cartoon characters or something like that, talking about how learning is fun. And I always thought as a kid, that's so stupid. I hate learning. Now I'm 50, just turned 50 in November. And I genuinely believe and honestly think that learning is fun. I like finding and learning new things. And I'm trying to impress that upon my own kids who are 15 and 9. And they think about it the same way I did when I was 15 and 9. And they just think that learning is stupid and school is so unnecessary. So anyway, if anybody out there like me is interested, there's all different ways to find this research out there. So another issue that I wanted to talk about was defamation. As if you've ever heard or watched my show before, you know that one of the ways I find topics to discuss is what's happened in my work life Monday through Friday when I go to work 9 to 5. And I think that it's perhaps interesting enough that other people would benefit from it. I'm working on a defamation case right now. And so I just thought I would mention the basics of defamation in the state of Florida. And then, of course, I found a case on defamation in my Florida Law Weekly. It wasn't that timely. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But understand that defamation is somebody saying or publishing in writing something about you that is false and perhaps incriminating. There's more elements to the cause of action than that. But what's interesting about defamation, and we learned this in law school in our torts class, is that defamation is one of these causes of action where there is an absolute defense. And it's not very often that you come across a cause of action where there is an absolute defense. And the absolute defense to a claim of defamation is if it's truth. And basically what it boils down to is, the truth may hurt. You may have heard that before. But if somebody says something to another person, or if they write something, either in a social media post or in the newspaper, whatever it may be, but it's truthful, you don't have a defamation claim. So, if somebody writes, so-and-so is a child molester, and of course, if they're talking about you and you didn't want that out there, but it happens to be true, you can't do anything about it. But for all of those false statements that are either made verbally or in writing, then you may have a claim of defamation. And what's interesting is, in this claim that I'm working on, there's allegations of theft, which my client, of course, strongly is of the position that it was not him. He never stole money.
Steve from West Palm Beach.
What's the name of the person?
Steve.
Great. Let's talk to Steve from West Palm Beach, and when I'm done with Steve, I'll get back to the defamation issue. Good morning, Steve.
Sorry, hold on. I lost him.
Oh, all right. Well, when he calls
But
back.
I do have Glenn from Hollywood.
Oh, great. Let's talk to Glenn. 2 calls at one time. That's pretty unusual. Hey, Glenn, good morning. Let me know when we have Glenn on the line.
Hello?
Yeah, is this Glenn?
Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah, what's up, Glenn?
Can you hear me? Hi. Hold on a second. I was turning up the volume here. I wanted to... Okay, I got a Post-it note on my front door from UPS to pick up a package.
Okay.
So I went down to the place to pick up the package, but when I noticed on the note, it wasn't... I didn't order this. I was expecting packages from someplace else. But to make a long story short, it wasn't mine. And I was wondering, is that considering, now that I went down there and picked that up, is it considered my property, or should I make efforts to get it back to the people that shipped it out?
Well, I don't know how other people feel about this, because it might boil down to more of a moral issue than a legal issue, but if it's not yours, it's not yours. I wouldn't make efforts to keep it. I would make efforts to return it. Now, I realize that might be difficult because you probably don't know who is the person that ordered it, but I mean, from a personal standpoint, and this is not me talking as a lawyer, this is just me talking as if I were in your shoes, I would take it back to UPS and say, this isn't mine, and then let them deal with it, because with all the tracking information and all the back office information that they have that you don't, I suspect that they'd be able to find the right person.
But that just did... Is there any possible way you could turn up your volume? I can barely hear you.
I can certainly turn up my volume, yes. So my response to you... Oops. I meant to turn up my volume and I made my screen bigger. All right. I am at 99 on my volume. Can you hear me any better, Glenn?
Yeah, just barely, yeah. The thing of it is that there is no address that exists that is an address. It's a non-existent address. This is something that was as close as UPS could find was my address.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I understand that, but it still doesn't make it yours. My advice, Glenn, would be take the package back to UPS, simply tell them I did not order this. This is not mine. You guys need to find the proper recipient. That's what I would tell them. I would wash my hands of it. I would leave the package there and say, I'm not taking this. Have you opened it? Do you know what it is? I mean, God forbid it's like drugs or something. Then you're really in trouble.
Oh no, I know what it is. It's an iPhone. So
Okay.
That's why I was wondering if I could sell that.
I wouldn't do that because it's not yours. If you sell something that's not yours, now you're dabbling in criminal activity.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, no, I just bring it back, drop it off. I would even document in writing that, because that's me. That's the lawyer in me coming out. I would document in writing that, hey, UPS, I dropped off this package today. It's not mine. You deal with it.
Because I've tried to get in touch with the company, and they just hang up saying that I'm not one of their customers.
I realize it's probably pretty frustrating, but I wouldn't approach this as though you're the lucky winner. That could come back to haunt you. I would drop it off at UPS.
Because I've heard like contrary things, like if somebody drops something off at your house, that you're not responsible for returning it. Is that true?
I don't know, but I'll tell you what. It's an interesting question, and so I'm going to type that into my notes to do that research, Glenn. And next week I'll have a better answer for you than I don't know, because right now my answer is I don't know. I've never heard that. And it doesn't make any moral sense that would be the law. Typically, the law follows common sense or moral sense, and the only way that would make any sense at all is if the property had been abandoned, because I know that abandoned property can be claimed at some point after a certain number of years, but I don't know if that's what you're referring to, and that's what I've heard before, but I'll have to look into whether if somebody else's property gets mistakenly dropped off at your house, if it's yours. I'll tell you what, I've got a personal anecdote. We keep getting packages dropped off at my front door because there's an address in the neighborhood that's remarkably similar to ours. And one time, my wife opened the box not thinking that it came to the wrong address, and it was a box full of wine. It was like a case of 12 or 24 bottles of wine. We were very tempted to keep it, but we brought the box and all of the wine to the lady that lives around the corner in the same neighborhood, and she was so appreciative, she actually gave my wife one of the bottles of wine. So, not that somebody can give you half a cell phone or something, but, my best advice to you this morning is return the phone to UPS, but listen in next week, because I'll have a better answer for you with regard to whether what you've heard is true. Okay?
Yeah, well, see, that's just it. The guy, when I went to pick it up, he took my driver's license and scanned it. So he knew right good and well, after I opened the package up, that it had a different name, and this is a fraudulent address that the company wrote down, and he scanned my driver's license and then still gave me the package.
Well, I hear you, and I understand what you're telling me, but I wouldn't suggest to you that it's okay to keep the property because of the actions of a driver. Sometimes you wonder where they find these guys and these ladies that deliver packages. Sometimes if you go on YouTube and you type in bad delivery drivers, you'll see all kinds of crazy stuff that these drivers do. So I wouldn't want you to think that...
Should he have returned, he should have sent it back to the company saying there is no such address?
I would think that there's some responsibility on the part of the driver to identify when the address is incorrect or when the recipient is incorrect, but I'm not suggesting to you that you're in the clear because the driver checked your driver's license. I would never suggest that to you.
2 minutes and you have another.
Well, it wasn't the driver that checked it. It was I had to physically go to another building to a place to pick it up because the guy just left a posted note on my front door. So I had to drive over to this place to pick this up at a building, and then it was like a drop-off point that the driver dropped it off at, and then he scanned my license, and then that's when I picked up the package. I didn't know it wasn't mine. Like I said, I was expecting packages from somewhere else. So that's when I got home, I found out that it wasn't mine.
Well, If you want to hang on to the phone for a week so that you can hear the advice I give you next week, that's fine. The advice I'm giving you now is, it's not yours, don't keep it. But I'll research your issue and I'll give you a better answer next week, okay? But until then, I do have to let you go because I'm running out of time, Glenn. My show is over in about 30 seconds.
I dropped it.
Okay, sorry about that, Glenn. Sharina had to drop you because we're running out of time. And the other caller, feel free to call my cell phone or please call back next week. It was great to have 2 calls at once, but obviously this is what happens. We ran out of time. Anybody that wants to call me on my cell phone, the number is 833-VASTOLA. That's 833-827-8652. Thank you for everyone that listened. Thank you to everybody that's watching on Facebook Live. And again, I'm going to keep thanking everybody for all the prayers and the kind words and the thoughts and the cards and the flowers and everything for the passing of my father. We really do appreciate that. We miss him dearly, but we know he's in a better place. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. God bless. Bye-bye.